Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to the Rebel Pastor YouTube channel. Pastor Sky over here. Yes, currently I'm in Malaysia. I do not know where I'll be next week. Hope you guys have had an amazing and awesome week. Once again, we're getting into another podcast and hope you've enjoyed the prior podcasts. Here we are, the Rebel Pastor channel. One of the big reasons why I started it especially is to have this fearless exploration of faith. And today we're going to go into a very, very special topic about John the Baptist. And we're going to kind of relook into his life and see, was he really a good person or not? Is he really a saint, right? Is he really someone that we should be looking up to? And of course, this is kind of, like I said, fearless exploration, but we want to really dive deep into it and think to ourselves, like, is this the John the Baptist that I really knew? Okay, and we're going to go over a lot of different verses and stuff too, but before we get into it, I'm just hoping that everyone has had an amazing and awesome week. Yes, I am more relaxed. I am more chill than before, especially that first episode. And yeah, a lot of things I have been thinking about during these weeks, right? So just for me, ever since I was young, like always an athlete. Someone who played sports all the time. In high school, I played varsity basketball, varsity volleyball, varsity rugby. For the community teams, I played American football and baseball. I kind of did, I dabbled in a lot of different sports, but man, like I'm not young anymore. So, it's like I played sports yesterday and my body is just wrecked. Like it's wrecked right now. Like, you wake up in the morning and like all the muscles in my, in my hips and my legs, my thighs is just killing me right now. The recovery is so long. And it's kind of funny because as you age, everything takes longer. The recovery process of getting sick, you're sick, before you're sick for 24 hours when you're younger. And then now I'm sick for like 3 days, 5 days instead. When I had COVID was terrible that one time I had it. When you have injuries, it takes longer for your muscles to heal or, God forbid, your bones break or something along that line. Actually, when I was growing up, because I was so into sports, but I wasn't really a strong person. So I've broken almost like every bone in my body. Well, of course, not literally, but playing basketball, I broke my ankles 3 times. My right ankle, I broke twice. My left one, I broke once. During soccer, I broke my collarbone. Plus, I broke my foot, the 5th metatarsal in my right foot, or my left foot. I've torn my Achilles completely when I was playing. You guys heard about that. When I was playing basketball in New Zealand, I tore my Achilles. Playing volleyball, what is it called? An orbital blow or orbital fracture. So what happens here is I had to get plastic surgery. Okay. Now, when I tell people I got plastic surgery, they're always saying to me like, well, it doesn't look any better. But I didn't get plastic surgery to look better. I got plastic surgery because the orbital, the orbital lobe right here, right? What happened was I was playing in a tournament and I'm the setter. And there's a free ball that came over and I came up to set it. And there's this one guy in my team, huge. He's 6'8", like 202 centimeters. And he came in and spiked it. And as he spiked it, what happened is his elbow came down right on my orbital lobe and I got hit. I got knocked out. Blood started coming out of my nose. And then what happened was, an orbital fracture is basically like the front of your face is thick bone. But as you get more and more inside the skull, it's like thinner and thinner. So what happens is they said that, so the bone around my eye is fine. It's strong. But when it got hit, the vibration was so strong that the bone underneath my eye collapsed. So there's a hole underneath my eye. And then my eye started falling into the hole, right? So what happened was this eye, my right eye was inside my head, because it's falling in the hole. I know, it's crazy. And here's the thing. It's not like, you couldn't really see like my eye, like, oh my gosh, your eye is like in the back of your head. It's not like that. So what happens is it was falling in the hole. So all of a sudden I had double vision. I was like, I can't see. So what they had to do was, the plastic surgery is they cut open the bottom of my eye here. They lifted my eye out of the hole. They put a plastic sheet underneath my eye and then reset my eyes again. Like that's what they did for the surgery, right? So like that's one of my other injuries I've had. So the crazy part is, you guys don't know me from the past, but I can see the difference. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to tell you honestly, this is just my honest opinion. I thought I was better looking before the accident. Like, that's just me. That's just me. I can see the difference between myself now and myself before then. At that time, I was like 23 years old, 24 years old, right? So yeah, like my pastor prayed for me. Surgery went well. Everything was good too. So it's not something that I'm really like, it doesn't really bother me anymore. But even now, I can still tell the difference of my eyes. They're not as symmetrical as it was before. And that's something that, yeah, that's my life, injuries, right? But now I'm a little bit older, and most of my injuries are not like bones and stuff. Most of my injuries are like muscles and tendons. Like, it's just like muscles are sore, or I pull my muscle and stuff like that too. But man, I'm over 40 now. So everything takes longer, everything. But there is one thing, I'll tell you this. There is one thing that I'm faster recovery at. And you're like, well, what can you be you're older now, so what could be a faster recovery? And I would say it's overcoming or handling difficulties. There's this, you just can't help it, because all throughout your life, you're going through all these terrible experiences, right? You go through difficulties, you go through tribulations, you go through difficult times, ups and downs in life, and you begin to realize, and you kind of put it into perspective of, oh, this is what life is like. And I'd say one thing that is a massive benefit of being a lot older and gaining a lot of experience is you're able to recover a lot better to difficulties and tribulations, and you're actually able to handle it much better too. So there is gold at the end of the rainbow, right? Yes, we do get older. Yes, we're not going to be as active, but I'll tell you this, the experience is worth more than the age. Right? And we can handle things a lot better. If you look at people today, like the young generation are a little bit more sensitive, right? But as they grow and as they experience and gain more wisdom, they are going to, hopefully, they'll be able to overcome these sensitivities and stuff like that too. This is one of the things I think I'm very adamant about. Like, one thing I do say is, one thing I'm so thankful to my dad is until 15, my dad spanked me. Like, he spanked me. And I am thankful for the spanking and for the discipline. I am, right? And you might think to yourself, it's like, well, how hard was it? Well, think about this, guys. I'm Asian. My dad was 2nd degree black belt. Right? So when he's like straight up, he's like doing the kung fu all over me, the taekwondo on me. So, it's not like it was easy for me, and you can't block it or anything, right? And when my dad got older, he would start using weapons. Right? No, and they're not weapons. Like, I remember this one time I had to choose the weapon my dad would spank me with. And there was like a baseball bat, a golf club, and a hockey stick, right? And of course, for me, I'm just like, man, the hockey stick has more leverage because it's longer, so that can hurt a lot too. It's more whipping. Golf club is made out of metal, and so is the bat. You know what? I'm going to go with the hockey stick. But that only happened once. Please do not call child services. I'm already over 40. You can't get him for that anymore, right? But I'm thankful. It gave me discipline. It made me see what the right path was. And I think there's something that we have to learn about suffering and going through different experiences of suffering in life. And I would say that it's not something that just makes you stronger. I say one of the things that I think is one of the greatest benefits, I think there's two benefits too, but I think one of the greatest benefits, especially someone who is of faith, is that when you go through the difficult and dark times and when you go through that suffering, it is easier to see God working in your life and how much God helps you. That's the one thing I am adamant about. It's like, you got to see it, because when things are good, sometimes it's hard to see God. But when you make it through the really difficult times and you're suffering, this is when you're able to see God even more. Like, let me give you an example. I remember I told you guys, I used to do missions work. And one time I went to South Africa. And in South Africa, I had this amazing experience. Now, it doesn't sound amazing, but it's an amazing experience. So I was there for the first time in my life, never been to Africa, really excited. I thought I was going to see jungle safari and lions and monkeys and stuff like that too. But South Africa, Joburg and Pretoria and Cape Town, it's like real like major cities, right? And what happened was, we started to pioneer a new church, and there's only four or five of us inside of a church. Well, there's four people that we met in England, and with the two missionaries, me and another Canadian missionary, went together to South Africa to start a new church. And what happened this one day? Okay, so after Christmas, Christmas times, vacation time, lots of time. Lots of play time, right? Everyone's on vacation. So we're like playing video games, we're playing cards all night. It gets to 3 a.m. It's 3 a.m. We watched a movie and stuff like that too. So at 3 a.m., we decide like, hey, it's time to go to sleep, but let's pray and then we'll go to bed, right? So, there's four of us in the house, in this small one-floor house, and we all start praying at 3 a.m. Around 3:45 a.m., like, I'm praying, but I hear something behind me. I'm like, what's that noise? And in my head, I'm like going, is this like, am I hearing, is this God? God, are you knocking on the door? Like, what's going on? I turn around to see what's going on behind me. And out of one of the rooms, 3 robbers come in. And one of the 3 robbers had a gun. And the guy points the gun at me. And I'm just like, and I'm going to be very honest, I was coming out of prayer. I didn't even know if this was real. I thought it was a dream at the first point. I'm looking back at this person like, what? And the guy's pointing the gun at me and he's like, get down. And I'm looking at him like, is this real? And he screams again, get down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real. So I lay on the ground flat as I can. And in my head, the thinking was, the flatter I am, if he shoots me, I'm a smaller target, right? If I bundle up, into a ball, then it's easy to shoot me. So I laid flat on the ground. I'm like, oh my goodness. I started praying. I'm like, God, protect us. God, make sure no one gets hurt. So one of the robbers is holding the gun at me. I'm not sure why he held the gun at me. Like, I'm thinking to myself is maybe he thought that I knew like Kung Fu or Taekwondo, which I did. I was a black belt. But he thought, maybe he thinks that I'm the one that's going to disarm him and do the chop sake and stuff like that too. But he just held it at me. One of the guys comes in. He starts taking our laptops and our phones. Now, my other missionary friend, where is he? My other missionary friend is in another room praying alone. And he's praying, and the other robber goes into the room. And he slowly walks into the room, and he sees my friend's laptop, like on the shelf. He grabs a laptop, but my friend is praying right in front of him. And my friend, he's like going, he told me, you know that feeling when you feel there's someone around you? I'm like, yeah, I know that feeling. He's like, yeah, I felt someone was there. And as I open my eyes, I see my laptop floating in the air. But my friend's also a journalist. All his work is on his computer. And he sees his laptop floating and he's like, what? He looks, and right above him, the robber is there. And the robber does this to my friend. Shh. But my friend, he jumps up, grabs the laptop, and we're in the living room, we hear the 2 guys fighting. And we're like, oh my gosh, someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. And we just hear the commotion. They're fighting in the room. All of a sudden, out of the room, the robber's running out the room, right? And I'm like, oh no, here we go. My friend starts to run out to chase him. But when he comes out to chase him, the guy with the gun sees him and then points the gun towards my friend. My friend freaks out, runs back into the room, locks the door. Now he's thinking, what's going on? There's a guy with a gun. Then the robbers start to kick the door, try to get into the room. So now my friend's freaking out, like, are they trying to kidnap me? What's going on? Oh no, right? And the door is being kicked. He's holding the door closed. But then he hears something behind him. And then he turns and looks behind him. And then there's a robber coming in the window. So now he's like, oh, what do I do? And then he just starts screaming. He's like, help, help. And then once he started screaming, all the robbers started like they started scattering around and they ran into the other room. And, we're like, what the heck is going on? We're all sitting there. The room is empty. We're wondering to ourselves, what are they doing in the room? And eventually the cops came and everything else. And, we after that incident, four of us guys, we just started crying. It was just too shocking. We started crying and praying, saying, thank you, God. They took all of our laptops. They took all of our phones, except for my friend's laptop, right? They took everything though. And they escaped. And what happened was so this is the first thing. Remember, the point I was trying to make to you is when you go through suffering and when you go through difficulties, you can see God working in your life more clearly. And this is the first thing, how did I see God working? So I can just say to you oh, well, God protected us. No one got hurt, even though we fought with them. But this is how crazy it was. My friends were telling me that in the newspaper, similar robberies were happening in our area. And one of the stories was there was a father with 4 daughters. And the robbers came in and they just shot the father. He didn't even fight. Didn't do anything, but he shot the father. There was another report that came out, same area. Oh, actually, this one might be in a different area where they're being robbed. There's a father and a daughter. Shoots the father and kills him. Shoots the daughter, and the daughter gets hit in the spinal cord, and she can't walk anymore. And when we saw this news, it really made me see how God answered our prayers. Because what was my one prayer? Is God, protect us. God, save us. God, save us. Pray, God, let no one get hurt. And what happened? Even though we fought with them and they had a gun, they had every reason to shoot us, they did not shoot. And at that moment, I'm like, wow, God, this is how much you saved us. This is how much you were with us. And I can realize more deeply, wow, God was really with us and really protected us at that time, right? That's my first point is when you go through the difficulties, when you go through the storm, when you weather it, what happens? You can see God so clearly working in your life. Now, I would say a second realization, I would say a second thing that happens from difficulties, and this is something I think that a lot of us will understand too, is on that day, we got robbed in the morning at 3:40 in the morning. Cops came, they took our statements. Obviously, we'll never see our stuff again, right? And, we're kind of scared. We just got traumatized in our own home. We don't want to stay home. So we went to a shopping mall and we went out and we're just trying to think to ourselves man, what just happened? And I would say it's very, very easy for us to think in that moment that God was not with us. Because think about it. We got robbed inside a church. This was our church. And we got robbed. And we're like, God, we're trying to work for you. And yet you don't even protect us from right? It's so easy in the difficulties to look at God and say, God, you were not there with us. It's so easy. But as we're going through the day, we're just too shocked by the experience. And what happened was we ended up going to McDonald's for lunch. And no one could really eat though. So we just kind of sat there. We got our ice cream cones and we just kind of sat there. And I thought to myself man, God, what are you trying to say to us? And then it was God inspired my heart to remember a message that was given maybe 2 weeks before, right? And I remember the pastor who's delivering the message said, when is the time you can give glory to God the most? When is that time? And this pastor started asking people questions. When do you think you can give the greatest glory to God? When do you think God will receive the greatest glory from you? And people said, oh, it's when you do it with all your heart. Oh, it's do it, when you sing or when you praise or when you pray. When you can do it with everything that you have. Oh, and people were giving all these answers. And then the pastor, listened to everyone. And then he said, when do you know if a friend is like, no, what did he say? Yeah, he said, when would you know if a friend is a true friend to you? And obviously it is, well, they're a true friend if they stick with you in the most difficult time. He says, yeah, because in the good times, everyone is your friend. In the good times, everyone hangs out with you. But if you have that one friend in the most difficult time, and they can still stand by your side when everyone else is against you, that's when you know you have a true friend. And the message was, when is the time that God receives the greatest glory from you? And he says, it's in the most difficult time. In the most difficult time, if you can pray that one word, if you can sing that one song in the most difficult time, that is the greatest glory. And when I remembered this, I was like, man, you know what? Right now, we are in the most difficult time. We are really in the most difficult time. And I was inspired to me say, okay, you know what? Let's go spread the gospel. So on that day we got robbed, we started going to evangelize. We started going to meet people. And, I'm going to be honest with you guys, we tried to meet people, but we were kind of still traumatized. And the whole time we didn't talk to a single person until the very, very, very end. And we were at a cafe and we were like, oh, should we talk to them? Should we talk to them? And eventually the cafe closed, right? It was closing up. And the last two people were leaving. And we're like, this is our last chance. And we talked to these two people. They sat down with us. And it was really inspiring because there's this one person there, and they had a great job, and they decided to take a year off. And when we asked them, oh, why are you taking a year off work? And the person said to us, because I'm searching for God. And then we met them, connected with them, and this person eventually started coming to church and accepted Christ. And, what's my second point here? My first point was the difficulties are there so that we can see God more clearly, that he's really with us and working with us. But the second point that I'll bring to you right now is when you go through difficulty and suffering, it actually propels you and it pushes you forward and faster. Right? It compels you. You have no choice. Think about this, when you guys are going to school or work, if you have a deadline or if you have a test tomorrow, what happens is you start to study faster. You start to work faster. And because the difficulty is right in front of you, you have to work harder. And what happened here was that difficult situation propelled us to meet people and eventually meet the right person that God wanted us to meet. That if we were in a comfortable situation, we never would have been in that situation. And what God is telling us is, guess what? You're going through difficulty. That's okay. Right? Number one is you're going to see me work even harder for you. I'm going to walk through the fire with you. I'm going to walk past the waters together with you. However, what's also going to happen is through that difficulty, it will propel you forward. It's like being in an ocean. When the ocean is calm, you don't go that fast and that far. But when the winds and the waves come, yeah, it's dangerous, but it pushes that boat much faster and much further too. So I would say, there's probably a Bible verse that I would bring up, right? Which is Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 14. And this is something that it's a very powerful verse. And it says that when times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider this. God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, no one can discover anything about their future. When something bad happens, you don't know what the future is. We don't know if it's going to be a good outcome or a bad outcome. And that's why consider what's happening right now. Whenever something bad happens, don't sit there and say, oh, my life is like this. God, why did you do this to me? Why? Because you don't know the future. When times are good, be happy. When times are bad, consider that God is doing both. And you don't know if there's going to be a greater ending to that difficulty in your life. So don't sit there complaining and saying to yourself, oh, this is the worst thing. God, how come you're never with me? No. God is with us through the good and the bad. And the best thing that we have to do is, even when it gets difficult, we have to pray and say, God, I wonder where this will lead. I don't know my future, but I trust in you. And because I trust in you, wherever it leads, God, I will go, right? So I hope it's something that we can learn more and more each and every week, and it'll be something that we can really open and move our hearts towards even more. Today, I did want, like I said before, today I did want to go into a deep dive, kind of reevaluating John the Baptist. Okay. Now, remember, we're going to do fearless exploration. Fearless, right? Yes, it sounds like, oh, you heretic. How can you say John the Baptist could have been bad? He was such a good person, right? You know, there's churches like St. John the Baptist Cathedral, St. John the Baptist Parish, St. John the Baptist High School. You know, there's so many things named after John the Baptist because we know him as such a good person, right? But I want everyone to take a deep dive into this, because sometimes we're only looking at things because that's what we're told, but no one's really taken a deep dive, right? Has anyone, think about you guys, how many people have gone into a deep dive only on John the Baptist? We just kind of take it for granted. And one of the things I want to challenge, and one thing I want you guys to just be fearless in, is our, questioning, but not questioning your faith or doubting. Questioning what we learn, look into it deeper, find the answers and say, this is interesting. I wonder what this means, right? So let's go into John the Baptist. Now, why is he a good person? We all know why he's good, right? Number one is, take a look at John chapter 1, verse 31. And in John chapter 1, verse 31, it shows that John the Baptist was the first to recognize Jesus as the Son of God, right? He says, I myself did not know him, but the reason I came baptizing with water was that he might be revealed to Israel. Boom. Right? So he came to baptize because God had to reveal to John the Baptist, this is the Messiah, the Son of God. Right? If you go further into John chapter 1, he'll talk about, I saw the dove descend upon him, the clouds open, I heard God's voice, this is my son whom I love, right? So we hear this entire story, and he becomes the first to recognize Jesus as the Son of God. And he even confesses it in John chapter 1, verse 34. He says, I have seen and I testify that this is God's chosen one. Boom. Right? So when you look at this, he not only recognizes, he confesses freely to everyone, this is the Son of God. Is he good? Absolutely. Just looking at this, absolutely. He is a good, he deserves a parish. He deserves to be a patron saint. He deserves to have churches and everything named after him and stuff too, right? Now, here's the question, before we get any deeper into this, I have a question to ask you guys first, and you guys can chat it up in the chat room, okay? So we're saved by faith, right? So when we believe, when we're convicted, and here's a good question for you is, can you go to heaven with just okay faith or little faith? Just I think he's a Messiah. Do you think that's going to get you into heaven? If faith is the number one thing, faith is not just he could be. Faith is conviction. It's absolute belief. I believe, and I confess in front of everyone that I believe in Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Right? Boom. That's what faith is. So it's the faith that saves us. It's the belief. It's the conviction, is the absolute knowledge. Now, here's the thing. What happens if by the end of your life, you're not sure? You're not sure if Jesus is the Messiah. You're not absolutely convicted. You're not absolutely certain. He's most likely the Messiah. He's probably. Would you say, as someone who knows the Bible or someone who knows faith, that is someone who is saved, someone who is uncertain, who doubts? One thing I would say is absolutely certain. If you look at Matthew 24, verse 13, what Jesus himself says, it's only the ones who stand firm until the end that are saved, which means the ending is more important than the beginning. Right? If we were to choose between the two, how do you want to do? Start good or end good? I think all of us would say we have to end well. right? Just think about the thief on the cross. He lived a life of crime, but at the very, very end of his life, he accepts Christ and he goes into heaven. He goes to paradise, right? So when we think about this, we're like, that makes, so you got to end well, right? You can't say that I started well, but then in the middle of my life, I'm no longer a Christian. I don't believe in Jesus anymore. Is that the life that you think is going to make it to heaven? The answer is no. It's better to go until the end. It's better. The end has to be strong. Think about this. Every inspiring book, story, movie you watch, if it's inspiring, it ends well. It ends well. It's not going to be like, and this person, man, he was a millionaire. Oh, what an inspiring story. Because at the end, he loses everything. His arms get cut off and he has no legs. Would you be like, you're inspired? You'd be like, no, that's uninspiring. Why? The end is important to us, right? The end is important. So here's the thing. With John the Baptist, how good was the end? How good was it? So let's start off with Matthew chapter 11. Now, in Matthew chapter 11, the one thing we know is John the Baptist is in prison at this moment, okay? We'll go into why he's there a little bit later, but we're going to get into how well did John the Baptist end. And we're going to look at Matthew chapter 11, verse 2 and 3. And it says, when John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, or Jesus, he sent his disciples to ask him, all right? So John the Baptist is in prison. He says, disciples, come here. I need you to go to Jesus, and I need you to ask him this question. Listen to this question carefully. In verse 3, it says, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? Now, when you hear this question, what are your thoughts? Let's erase from your mind that this comes from John the Baptist, because sometimes you can have that bias because it's John the Baptist, it must be good, right? If anyone else said that on their deathbed, if anyone said that at the end of their life, Jesus, are you really the one? Or should we expect someone else? Does that sound like someone who is ending well? Right? Like we went over that question. Is it better to start well or is it better to end well? And we're all pretty certain it's better to end well. It's better to end your life with Jesus, end knowing who he is, believing in him as the Savior and the Christ. But John the Baptist at the end of his life, he didn't end well. It doesn't look like it because his last question to Jesus is, I don't even know if you're really the Messiah. Should we expect someone else? That sounds like doubt. Now let's look at Jesus' response in verses 4 through 6. Jesus replies to John's disciples. And he's like, hey, I want you to go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. That was Jesus' response. He said, hey, guess what? Go back to John and tell him what you hear and see. What does that mean? Well, think about this. Just the fact that John the Baptist still has his own disciples, there's something funny about that, don't you think? Isn't it a little bit funny? That if you recognized who Jesus was, like 3 years ago, like Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, wouldn't you follow Jesus? Right? Wouldn't you follow him? Wouldn't you want to be next to him? Wouldn't you want to be like, would you still have disciples? But Jesus says, come here, let me tell you something. Go back to John, tell him what you hear and see. Blind receive sight, lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, deaf hear, dead are raised. Why is he saying this to John? He's saying this because John was never there to see or hear anything. And then Jesus sums it up with verse 6, blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. He's talking about someone stumbling on account of him, and he wants the disciples to tell John the Baptist this. That doesn't sound good. And to tie things up, look at Matthew 11:11. What does Jesus say about John the Baptist? Truly, I tell you, among those born of woman, there is not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. That sounds like praise. Yet, so yet means the opposite, right? There's something opposite coming along. whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. What does that mean? The least in the kingdom of heaven is the last person that gets in, but they're greater than John the Baptist. How can that be interpreted? And there's going to be many interpretations of what that means, but we have to put everything into context, all of Matthew chapter 11. And it started out with John the Baptist's doubt, not sure if Jesus is actually the Messiah. And that's something we have to think about, right? You can't just sit there and say, oh, well, of course. No, if we understand the concept of faith and being saved by faith, you have to be convicted. Then if you end in this way, what does that mean? And that's something we need to look over, right? And I encourage all of you guys out there, look over it. What does it mean? What's it trying to say? Do you know why John the Baptist actually died? Do you know why John the Baptist was actually in prison? And a lot of people think that he was a martyr, but martyr means you are someone who dies for the gospel, for what you believe in. But do you know why John the Baptist went to jail? Matthew chapter 14, verse 3 and 4, very clear. Was it for the gospel? No, it says, Herod had arrested John the Baptist and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, it's not lawful for you to have her. What does that mean? John's going to the king and saying, you can't marry your brother's wife. Is that for the gospel? That's something we have to think about, right? That's why we're reinvestigating this case of John the Baptist. He was looked so highly upon, but is he good? Is he really that good? And, I know that there's going to be some people out there that are going to think like, oh no, this is clickbait. You're just trying to rile people up. No, I want to have discussion. If you've seen our podcast from day episode 1, it's about fearless exploration and it's about discussion. What does this mean? What does that mean? This doesn't make sense. And we have to talk about it. We have to discuss it too. And I do think, there's a lot to think about right now of what I just talked about. But there's something else that we're going to end with that will make you think even more deeply. So go back to Matthew chapter 11 and verse 14. You know what Jesus says about John the Baptist? He says, if you are willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who was to come, right? Basically, Jesus calls John the Baptist Elijah. What does that mean? Right? And we're going to get into that in the next episode too and go a little bit more deeper into that also. Okay? So, that's today's podcast. Hope you guys really enjoyed that. A lot of things to think about, a lot of things to make you think more deeply. And I hope it's something that all of us can really open our hearts and our eyes to, not to make us doubt, but to strengthen our faith, right? To explore is to find new places that we've never seen before, and it opens our hearts and our minds, and it strengthens us, our foundation even more, okay? So there it is. Hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. Have an amazing and awesome week. I can't wait to see you guys again. We'll see you, every Tuesday, I believe. All right? Everyone take care, and till next week, this is Pastor Sky signing off. Bye-bye.